Hi, this is Mike Gaffney, Chief Operating Officer at SpecRite. I'm really excited about today's webinar. One of the most rewarding aspects of working at SpecRite is getting to talk to business operators from all industries, be it food and beverage, packaging, automotive, consumer goods, retail, beauty and cosmetics, medical devices, literally every industry category. When we discuss specification management and how the SpecRite platform and show the SpecRite platform, these operators immediately get the value and impact of how better managing their specs could impact productivity, reduce errors, and expedite new product development. Nearly 100% of them also admit that they are doing less than great managing their specifications today. They're using spreadsheets, shared drives, PDFs, or trying to make other systems like ERP handle specs which they weren't built to do. The challenge for our business partners is convincing their executive management teams that they need a specification management platform at all. Their reaction is often, why do we need a spec management platform? We survived this long without one, and we seem to be making, shipping, and selling our products. What they don't see is that their current processes are rife with inefficiencies and potential failures. When you combine that reality with the increasing complexity of today's global supply chain and consumers' preferences for things like next-day delivery, single-serve packaging, private label brands, direct-to-consumer brands, 50 different flavors of Doritos, there's a need for better specification management. SpecRite's definition of specification management is the ability to manage product and packaging specifications and their relationships to component parts, finished goods, suppliers, machines, and more to help you make, sell, and ship your product faster with fewer mistakes and less tribal knowledge. Which is why I'm excited for today's webinar. We commissioned Forrester Research, the leading and one of the largest technology research companies in the world, to conduct a total economic impact study on the value and return on investment of implementing specification management. The total economic impact study is a methodology that Forrester has perfected over more than 15 years of use in the field with companies like IBM, Microsoft, Google, and Cisco. The output of this study will help our business operators communicate the value of specification management to their executive management teams and make the return on investment more concrete. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Kim Finnerty, the lead researcher at Forrester, who will take you through the methodology and results from SpecRite's Total Economic Impact Study. Kim has over 25 years of consulting experience and degrees from both Yale and Harvard Business School. It's my pleasure to introduce Kim. Turning it over to you, Kim.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks a lot for that great introduction. We've got a lot of great content to share from the customers that we interviewed. So I want to start off by just giving you an idea of what we'll be covering today. What I'll do is I'll go through a little bit of background on the TEI methodology that Mike just described, so you get a sense of where the numbers are coming from. I'll share a top-line summary of our findings, and then I'll drill down and talk in more detail about the specific costs and benefits that we identified. And finally, I'll leave you with a one-page summary of the total economic impact of SpecRite. But first, though, I want to just let you know that this webinar presentation is a summary of a much more detailed case study. I would definitely recommend that you download a copy of the study and review it because it provides some really great context, a little bit more customer input, more of the detail about the assumptions and the calculations in the financials that I'll be sharing today. So as Mike was saying, the total economic impact is a framework that Forrester's been using for many years as a way of making sure that we look at all of the factors that are important in making technology investments. Obviously, that includes costs and benefits, but one of the things that makes the TEI a little different is that we consider both hard and soft costs. So hard costs or benefits are those kinds of things that can be quantified and they directly impact the company's financial statements. Soft benefits and costs are often extremely important to the organization. In fact, sometimes they're even more important than some of the hard costs, but they don't flow through. They're not directly accounted for in the financial statements. And then finally, we risk adjust all of the numbers that we put together to give some sense of how likely it is that other organizations will be able to achieve the same kind of benefits and costs as the folks that we interviewed. We take a multi-step well-defined research process in constructing the TEI. So it starts with some due diligence up front. We talk with key stakeholders at the company that's commissioning the study, and we review their sales and marketing materials. But then we move quickly to the heart of the study, which is really speaking directly to customers and key executives, the folks who evaluated the technology, who implemented it, and the folks who are actually experiencing that impact on their business so that we can understand what that's really all about for them. So while this study was commissioned by SpecRite, and they provided us with the customer names for our interviews, they did not participate in the interviews. Those were just between us and the customers that I'll talk about. And Forrester maintained editorial control of the study. There's clearly a positive story here that I'll take you through, and we're really excited to share it with you. But just be aware this study doesn't constitute an endorsement of SpecRite. So on a very high level, what we found is that the customers we interviewed told us their supply chain executives were wasting time and facing a lot of frustration trying to manage the explosion in specifications that's been brought on by market-driven demand for new products and varieties. As Mike was talking about, there may be lots of new flavors, recipes, packages, sizes. All of these things are creating additional specifications and a huge administrative burden on the teams. And that's particularly because there was no one place where all of these specifications were stored. There was no one format for actually recording the specifications. They look different, sometimes contain different information. And there was no one process for keeping them up to date. But after implementing SpecRite, what the customers told us was that they had a single source of truth for specifications that went throughout the organization. So this obviously brought about tangible improvements to their bottom line, but they actually were also able to improve the job satisfaction of their teams because those folks were now able to focus on the real skills that they bring to the job and not how to chase down the next piece of paper. In fact, when we used the inputs from these interviews to create our model, Forrester found that SpecRite improved the bottom line to the tune of a 469% ROI. That's based on $3.2 million worth of benefits to the organization at costs of just over $600,000. So a net present value of $2.6 million. So let me tell you a little bit more about the customers that we spoke with to get these numbers. We talked to 5 different SpecRite customers, and they really were quite a diverse group. They ranged from a $30 million company that had 30 users of the SpecRite system up to a $4 billion company that had over 300 users. They covered both B2B and B2C types of operations. And as you can see, we spoke with quite senior people across the supply chain that included engineering, procurement, materials management, a variety of different functions within the supply chain. And despite that, we found that they had a lot of very similar experiences. You know, when companies go out to make a technology investment, there's usually a problem or often a set of problems that they're trying to resolve. People don't just wake up in the morning and go out and say, gee, how can I spend the company's money today? There's something that's not working as well as it could, and they're trying to fix that. So we found that to be the case here as well. The problems that they were facing were all rooted in this proliferation of products and flavors and sub-brands. And it was important to keep introducing those. It's not something they could stop. It was important to meet market demand. But as a result, they were seeing an almost constant stream of requests from around the organization for specification information. This was taking up a huge amount of people's time. And it was also making them realize that they were very reliant on their suppliers for a lot of this information. And they also came to realize how inadequate their own internal systems were for keeping the specifications safe and available. In some cases, customers told us they'd been looking for a solution like this for years, and they had tried to bend other software to their will, and they just had not been able to make it work for them. What all of the customers described was a highly disjointed, usually a paper-based system for storing their specification data. In one organization, most of the specs actually resided with the vendors. making it, difficult to enforce QA standards and create RFPs. Nobody wants to be the person who has to call up one vendor and ask for their specifications so you can put the product out to bid to other suppliers. Just not very comfortable. And others found that the specifications were stored in a variety of physical locations around the company. It could take days to track them down. And even the digitally stored specifications, folks who had a software or database to try to store some of this information, it was usually saved on some kind of outdated software that had to be customized, and that often required IT to get involved to pull reports. So that wasted even more time. Customers told us once they had SpecRite in place, they experienced, again, very similar benefits despite their differences as companies. By providing the single source of truth for the specification data, first of all, executives told us that SpecRite really lightened the administrative load on their supply chain teams, which allowed them to respond to specification requests a lot more quickly and easily. This obviously was what they were originally hoping for. This was what had sort of led them to look for this kind of a solution. I think it was something of a pleasant surprise to most of them that they actually improved their relationships with their suppliers and their collaboration with those suppliers because they could provide them with the information that they needed to respond to RFPs and to make the products to the expected quality standards and to stay up to date with this ever-changing stream of graphics and promotional packaging and other kinds of things. And finally, these customers also found that they were in a better place from a regulatory compliance standpoint because they were reminded when to update documents, and they had the peace of mind of knowing that everything was in one place if they needed to provide compliance documentation to customers or to regulatory agencies. So the people we spoke with were both pleasantly surprised by what they could do with SpecRite, as well as feeling like they had finally found exactly the thing that they'd been looking for to meet their specific needs. And I still remember the sense of validation in the voice of the person, the senior automation engineering manager in the lower left, when he talked about finding that system finally at a trade show that he'd been looking for all his life. So with all of these interviews under our belt then, our next step was to calculate the financial impact of the technology for an organization. Now, we can't go and construct 5 different financial models. None of them would really, make sense or would really fit everybody who might be looking at this report or considering this investment. So what we do is to create one model that represents the kinds of organizations we spoke to, and that can be adapted and flexed to your particular organization. So I know everyone out there listening, there's going to be something on this page that does not fit your organization. Gee, we're smaller than that, we have more employees than that, etc. But again, I refer you back to the full study that has all of these calculations spelled out. It makes it a lot easier to sort of flex this to meet your particular needs. But from here on out, the numbers that I'll be taking you through in terms of the benefits and costs will all be regarding the results that we'd expect for this particular $2 billion manufacturer with 300 users and 5,000 specifications to maintain. As I mentioned in the overview earlier, our composite organization will experience $3.2 million worth of present value, risk adjusted over the 3 years. And that is from 6 different benefit areas that we identified through talking to them. And those really fall into 3 different categories. There are material cost savings, there are increased revenue opportunities, and there are productivity savings that all come out of the deployment of SpecRite system. So I'll walk through the benefits in a little bit more detail in the next few slides, but you can see that they came from a number of different areas. So the first and largest benefit that most customers saw was a savings in their cost of materials because they were able to line up the right suppliers and communicate with them on an ongoing basis about their requirements. For instance, one customer told us that a key motivation for putting SpecRite in place was to create an easier process internally to put packaging materials out to bid. They had seen some good success in the past years by putting materials out to bid every couple of years. That allowed them to lower their overall costs, but it was a very time-consuming process internally, and it was almost impossible for anybody who wasn't already one of their vendors to reply, because the company wasn't able to provide those reliable specs for the hundreds of packaging SKUs they were buying. So if you were a potential new vendor, you would then need to go get that packaging, reverse engineer it, and then make a bid. And this was really, onerous, especially if you're talking about a smaller or a more specialized kind of vendor. So they really had cut a lot of folks out of the ability to respond to their needs. Once they were able to provide the standard specifications to all of the respondents up front, though, they find that they had a new pool of vendors replying to their requests. That often allowed them to buy better quality materials from more specialized suppliers, or it let them lower their prices because of that increased competitive pool. And also because of the fact that the suppliers could really sharpen their pencils with confidence because they knew what they were really bidding on, and that that wasn't going to change once they got the business. So our model showed that this benefit amounted to $1.4 million over the course of the 3 years for our $2 billion composite organization. Another way companies found that they saved on material costs was through order consolidation. And that was made a lot easier once all the specifications obviously were in one place and were digitized so that they could be easily compared. Different organizations accomplished this in different ways. So for many, it was easier now to see where they had redundant packaging SKUs, for instance, or redundant raw material SKUs, where basically, they have the same product that's maybe being bought in different locations, and really they could reduce the number of SKUs. They could eliminate something and use the other for all of those needs. That let them increase the order quantities that they had, and that let them benefit from larger volume discounts. Even without eliminating SKUs, we talked to another customer who told us that they had a number of packaging and raw materials products that they were buying that could easily be combined and run together for volume discounts at a number of their suppliers. But lots of times they missed that opportunity because they had different people who were responsible for the different packages or materials. So they used SpecRite to flag down those products that could be combined. Then whoever is placing an order for one of the products will then get an alert that they can that they should look and see whether any of the others need to be ordered as well. And in those cases, they're then able to combine those orders and get that volume discount. So all of these things, different ways of lowering materials costs as a result of consolidating orders, that all saved our composite organization over $300,000. Top line growth is a key objective for virtually any company. And an important way to accomplish that is to develop and introduce new products. Most organizations, though, find that commercializing a new product is a very time-consuming process, and that it can be very risky. I think we've all probably read or heard the statistics about the large percentage of new products that fail once they're launched. So one of our interviewees told us that they significantly reduced their time to market and the number of new products that they can launch each year by using SpecRite to put together their bill of materials. They can focus on incorporating materials that the company is already buying from suppliers who've already passed quality and regulatory scrutiny. This also had a positive impact on their success rate because they were using proven parts. And they've been able to use an analytic approach to marry up their specification data with their sales data and determine which of the colors and flavors or even trendy ingredients are driving positive sales right now, and then use those elements in their products so that they maximize the new product success rate. We used a fairly modest assumption here that the composite organization would be able to introduce one additional new product each year, driving $839,000 in added profit over the 3 years. Another kind of incremental revenue that folks saw as a result of having SpecRite in place was the ability to respond to specific customer demands, right? So another customer told us that they were able to access specification data, virtually within minutes, And that let them respond more quickly and with more confidence to customer requests for either special packaging or formulas or private label product opportunities. We don't want to be the last person responding to those kinds of requests. We want to be able to, get in front of them and show customers that we're excited and that we're, buttoned up and ready to produce products. So, you know, this customer told Forrester that their success rate with those kinds of opportunities was really improved because they were able to provide all of that, not only the pricing, the great pricing and the great product that they put together, but they were able to provide compliance information and supply chain information along with their bid, so that let the customer really increase their confidence that the company was ready to produce the product for them. So this customer responsiveness benefit earns the composite organization an additional $335,000 in profit. So now on to savings from productivity. The final type of benefit that SpecRite customers saw really was the one that they were most expecting to see: cost savings from automating their inefficient paper-driven storage and retrieval processes. So in this case, customers told us that the level of detail automatically captured in SpecRite as specification changes were made and approved in their organization meant that they didn't need to keep following up on approvals or hunt down something in the middle of a change process. No one lost that email attachment with the new graphics or the package design. Nobody argued about whether the person before them had already approved it. All of those things that can slow down the change process. So all the changes, approvals, and other information was available and associated with that spec right in the SpecRite system, and it could easily be pulled up to see where in the process it stood. So this kind of savings provided an additional $191,000 in time savings for the organization. And then the supply chain professionals who were dealing with these specifications every day were also able to save time. Again, in many cases, what everybody was looking for in the first place. They were able to save hours each week by having that single source of truth to access any specification related information they required, or to provide it out to someone who was requesting it of them, whether that's a customer or an internal user. And they were able to do that rather than spend their time chasing that information down around the organization. And instead, they were able to apply that time to doing their quote unquote real job, and letting the company benefit from their skills. So this produced another $70,000 in productivity savings for the organization. Now, as I mentioned up front, one of the things that the TEI takes into consideration is the soft benefits of a technology investment that aren't as easy to qualify. And we had three main types of these. First of all, the supply chain executives told us that they're able to sleep at night now. Right? They know that the information is secure and accessible throughout the organization. They don't have to worry that a key piece of information is going to be lost when a packaging engineer leaves the company, when a supplier goes out of business, or when that archaic database goes down unexpectedly. Secondly, because SpecRite stores and tracks all of the information associated with that given spec as it goes through the supply chain, it's easy for the organizations we spoke with to trace any problem ingredients or packages so that they can identify and control the source of any issues. And then in a more general sense, the work that companies did getting SpecRite up and running and using it day to day has created a more proactive mindset throughout the whole organization about product quality and product safety that they believe has really helped them to prevent recalls and other issues. So as in everything in life, all of those benefits come at some kind of cost. In this case, customers told us that about 95% of that cost was the licensing fee, which is about $535,000 in total over the 3 years. Now, I just want to remind everyone that just like the benefits numbers we discussed in the last section, this is not the cost of SpecRite. This is a projection of the cost for this particular $2 billion composite organization with 300 users and 5,000 specifications. So obviously, if you're thinking about working with SpecRite, you'll want to speak with them directly to get a better sense of the actual cost to your company. There were also some minimal training costs that were involved here to get users up and running with the software. In this case, about $25,000 over the course of the 3 years. These aren't out-of-pocket costs, they're the internal cost of the time that those employees need to dedicate to learning the software, which really was only a few hours per employee. So to wrap it all up, that is the total economic impact of SpecRite. The 469% ROI, $2.6 million in net present value over those 3 years. And as you can see, while there's a very small, sort of negative investment right there at the front, already by year one, well before year one is over, the system has paid for itself, and it's a very positive story. So thank you for your time and attention. I hope this case study was helpful to you as you navigate your own specification management journey. I'd refer you again to the full study where all the assumptions behind these projections are detailed, and you can use them to get a sense of the kind of ROI your own organization might experience. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Oh, sorry, Kim. Didn't mean to cut you off there. Yeah,
No.
thank you. Thank you very much. As Kim mentioned, the full report can be accessed at specrite.com. And if you, so you can download it directly from our homepage. If you have any questions and like to go deeper, there's obviously a lot of content in the report itself. You'll see once you download it. Kim gave a great overview of the highlights in the report, but there's a lot more meat on the bone. So if there are questions that arise from that, please reach out to our teams. Please reach out to me directly. I can be reached at mike@specrite.com. Again, this is Mike Gaffney. We'd like to thank everybody for joining the webinar today, and look forward to talking to you in the near future. Thank you very much.